Why you keep waking up at 3:33? It's not random. You wake up. The room is dark. You reach for your phone, and there it is again. 3:33. Not once, not twice. Every few nights, sometimes every night, always that same number staring back at you in the dark. Part of you wants to call it coincidence. Your mind looks for explanations. You went to bed at a certain time, your sleep cycle, just chance. But the feeling that follows isn't the feeling of coincidence. It's the feeling of being noticed, and that feeling doesn't dissolve the way ordinary feelings do. It lingers into the morning and follows you through the day. It sits quietly underneath everything else you do, waiting for you to pay attention to it. Here is what 3:33 actually is. It marks the precise boundary between one state and another. Spiritually, 3:33 is a threshold hour, the point at which the conscious mind is most quiet, and something underneath the surface becomes briefly audible. You are not waking up by accident. Something inside you is already awake, already listening, and it has been trying to get your attention. That is the surface meaning. But what it's pointing to in your life, and why it keeps intensifying, has layers most people never reach. That is exactly what this video will decode. The liminal hour. There is a specific quality to 3 in the morning that no other hour carries. It is not simply late. It is not simply early. It exists in a space between the two, in the narrow corridor where one day has not yet released its grip and the next has not yet arrived. Most people move through this hour unconscious, never knowing it passed. But some people are pulled awake inside it, and that pulling is never without reason. Neuroscientists call this the hypnopompic threshold, the borderland between deep sleep and waking consciousness. Your brain at this hour operates differently than at any other point in the day. The prefrontal cortex, the part of you that filters, rationalizes, and organizes experience into logical categories, is still partly offline. What remains active is older, deeper, more instinctual. It is the part of you that perceives before it thinks. It is the part of you that knows things your waking mind has not yet given itself permission to acknowledge. In many spiritual traditions, 3 in the morning was never called nighttime. It was called the thin hour, the hour when the boundary between what you know and what you have not yet allowed yourself to know becomes temporarily permeable. Mystics across cultures, Sufi, Kabbalistic, Taoist, identified this specific window as the hour of clearest inner reception, not because of superstition but because they had observed across generations that this is when human beings hear most clearly what they normally drown out. The noise of ordinary life cannot reach this hour. Whatever speaks here speaks without competition. This is not metaphor. It is a description of a real neurological and psychological state that human beings have recognized across cultures for thousands of years. When you wake at 3:33, you are not waking into ordinary alertness. You are waking into a state where something that cannot speak to you during the noise of the day finally has the quiet it needs to reach you. The mind's usual noise, the planning, the analyzing, the managing, has gone quiet. And in that quiet, something older and more essential moves forward. The question is not whether something is happening. The question is whether you are willing to listen to what it is trying to say. Your body already knows. Most people focus on the number. They search for its meaning, read interpretations, try to decode it intellectually. But the number is not the message. The number is the timestamp. The real signal is in the waking itself. Your body woke you up. Not an alarm, not a sound, not a disturbance from outside. Something from inside pulled you out of sleep with enough force that your eyes opened and you reached for your phone. That is not nothing. That is a physiological event with a cause. The human body does not wake from deep sleep without reason. There are biological mechanisms behind every spontaneous waking. Cortisol shifts, the nervous system moving from parasympathetic to sympathetic activation, an internal alarm tripped by something the body is processing beneath conscious awareness. These are not mysterious processes. They are the body's way of flagging what the mind has not yet resolved. The body keeps a different kind of record than the mind does, and it is far less willing to look away from what is unfinished. What the body processes while you sleep is not random either. It processes what the waking mind has been carrying but not fully integrating, the unresolved, the recognized, but not yet acknowledged. The feeling you pushed aside during the day because there was too much to do and too little space to sit with it. Sleep does not erase what is unfinished. It holds it, turning it over, looking for the opening that will finally let it through. Your body is trying to complete a loop your conscious mind has left open. And this is where most people get the meaning wrong. They look outward, at the number, at external signs, at what might be coming toward them. But the waking itself is pointing inward. It is pointing at something already inside you that is asking to be seen. Something that has likely been asking for longer than the 333 waking has been happening. The number confirms the timing. The body is the messenger, and the body does not lie in the way the mind sometimes does. It does not rationalize, defer, or reframe. It simply signals, and it will keep signaling until the signal is received. The body has a kind of honesty the thinking mind has long since learned to negotiate with. What repetition actually means. A sign that appears once could be coincidence. A sign that appears twice invites curiosity. A sign that appears 10, 15, 30 times across weeks and months is no longer a sign. It is a pattern, and patterns carry a different kind of meaning entirely. The human mind is a pattern recognition system. It evolved to find signal within noise, to detect repetition as information, to treat recurrence as significance. When something repeats, the nervous system registers it as important even before the conscious mind has caught up with why. This is not irrationality. It is intelligence operating at a level beneath language. But there is something else happening in the repetition of 333 that goes beyond neurological pattern recognition. The repetition is telling you something about the nature of what is trying to reach you. It is telling you that it has been patient, that it has tried before and will keep trying, that it is not going away simply because you have not yet responded. Most things, when ignored, eventually stop trying. This has not stopped. This is not the behavior of random chance. Random events do not persist. They scatter. What persists is what has intention behind it, whether that intention comes from an external source or from a part of yourself that is operating beneath the surface of your ordinary awareness. The repetition is also a measure of urgency. The pattern intensifies at certain moments in a person's life and quiets during others. If you think back honestly, you will likely notice that 333 has not appeared at an equal rate throughout your life. It has clustered. It has arrived in waves, and those waves have coincided with moments of transition, with periods of emotional intensity, with crossroads you were either facing or avoiding. The pattern has followed your inner life with a precision that chance cannot explain. That is not coincidence. That is timing. And timing, in spiritual terms, is never neutral. The pattern is not random noise. It is a calendar entry written in a language your body recognizes before your mind does. Why it finds you during certain seasons. There is a reason this pattern does not appear constantly. There is a reason it arrives when it does and recedes when it does. 333 is not ambient background noise. It is a response to something specific that is already happening in your life. It is not creating a transition. It is marking one that is already in motion. This distinction matters more than it might seem at first. You are not being pushed into something. You are being shown something that has already begun. Think carefully about the period in which the waking first became consistent. What was shifting in your life at that time? Not necessarily in dramatic, visible ways. Often the most significant transitions begin beneath the surface in the emotional undercurrent, weeks or months before anything changes in the external world. The outer life can look entirely stable, while the inner life has already begun to reorganize itself entirely. A relationship beginning to loosen its grip. A sense of purpose that no longer fits the life you built around it. A grief that never fully finished moving through you. A version of yourself that is ready to be released, but has not yet been given permission. These internal transitions are real events. They are not less significant because they cannot be seen from the outside. In fact, they are often more significant because they reshape the architecture of how you move through the world. long before any outer change becomes visible. The inner shift is always the original event. Everything that changes externally is its echo. 333 arrives precisely in these seasons because these are the seasons when the deeper part of you most needs to communicate with the surface, when the gap between what you are living and what you are called toward has grown wide enough to produce a kind of internal pressure that eventually wakes you in the night. That pressure is not a malfunction. It is a sign that something in you is working exactly as it should. You are being woken up because something in you already knows it is time. The only question is whether the part of you that is still holding on is ready to hear it. The Jungian Layer. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence of events that have no causal relationship but carry undeniable symbolic resonance for the person experiencing them. He was not describing superstition. He was describing a real psychological phenomenon in which the external world seems to mirror the internal world with a precision that cannot be explained by chance alone. Jung documented hundreds of these cases across his clinical practice, and what struck him most was not the strangeness of the coincidences, but the timing. They clustered, always, around moments of psychological threshold, around the moments when something in a person was ready to shift but had not yet shifted. Jung believed that the unconscious mind, the vast region of psychological life that operates beneath the threshold of conscious awareness, is constantly generating signals. These signals rarely arrive as direct statements. They arrive as images, dreams, physical sensations, and patterns of coincidence that repeat until the conscious mind finally pays attention. The unconscious is not subtle because it is weak. It is persistent because it is patient. Waking at 3:33 fits this model precisely. The unconscious does not send a calendar invite. It does not schedule a meeting. It finds the thinnest moment in your day, the one where your rational filtering system is most quiet, and it sends what it has been trying to send. This does not require you to believe in anything supernatural. It requires only that you acknowledge something most psychology now accepts, that the conscious mind is not the whole of who you are. There is more of you than you have access to in waking life. And that larger part of you has needs, perceptions, and knowledge that the surface layer has not yet integrated. It has been accumulating what you have been deferring, and at some point the accumulation becomes too large to hold in silence. 333 is, in Jungian terms, the unconscious knocking. The question Jung would ask is not what the number means. It is what you have been refusing to look at, and why now, of all times, it is knocking loudly enough to wake you. What 333 is not. Before going further, something important needs to be said clearly. 333 is not a warning. It is not an omen. It is not evidence that something bad is approaching or that you have been singled out for suffering. This interpretation exists, and it circulates widely, and it is wrong in the way that most fear-based spiritual narratives are wrong. It takes something that is fundamentally about awakening and reframes it as threat. Fear is a powerful way to keep people's attention, but it is a dishonest one, and it keeps people focused on the wrong question entirely. 333 is also not confirmation that you are specially chosen above other people. That interpretation, while more flattering, is equally misleading. It creates a kind of spiritual identity built on distinction rather than on genuine inner work. It replaces the discomfort of real self-examination with the comfort of feeling selected, and that comfort is precisely what prevents the actual work from happening. And 333 is not a lottery ticket. It is not a signal that abundance, success, or external reward is on its way to you if you simply wait. This reading treats a profound internal phenomenon as a cosmic vending machine, and it leaves people focused on what they might receive rather than on what they are being asked to understand. Passive expectation is not the same as genuine readiness. Waiting for something to arrive is not the same as doing the inner work that makes arrival possible. What 333 actually is, and this is worth sitting with, is a reflection. It is the external world mirroring an internal state back to you in a form specific enough and persistent enough that you cannot dismiss it. It is not giving you something new. It is showing you something that is already there. This distinction matters enormously, because if 333 is a gift arriving from outside, you can remain passive. But if 333 is a mirror, then what it is asking of you is attention, honesty, a willingness to look at what the reflection is showing you, even when what it shows is uncomfortable. That is a far more demanding invitation, and it is the real one. The message underneath the number. Every symbol has a surface reading and a deeper reading. The surface reading of 333 is well documented. It appears in numerology as a number of alignment, of the mind, body, and spirit moving into coherence, of creative energy and spiritual communication. That reading is not wrong, but it is incomplete in the way that the definition of a word is incomplete compared to the experience of what that word actually describes. Alignment sounds peaceful. What it actually involves is rarely peaceful at all. It is the process of parts of yourself that have been living out of harmony with each other, finally being asked to come into agreement. The deeper reading of 333 is not about alignment as a destination. It is about alignment as a process, specifically, the often uncomfortable and disorienting process of becoming more internally coherent when parts of yourself have been living in contradiction, when what you believe conflicts with what you feel, when what you do conflicts with what you know, when the life you have built conflicts with the life that something deeper in you is trying to live. Most people who are woken by 333 are not people who have their lives neatly together. They are people in the middle of something. They are carrying something that hasn't resolved yet. They are at a threshold they haven't yet crossed, or they have already crossed it without fully acknowledging what they left behind. The message underneath the number is this: you are in the process of becoming more whole. And that process, by its nature, involves the parts of you that were fragmented beginning to resurface. The feelings you set aside, the truths you acknowledged privately but never acted on, the version of yourself you outgrew but haven't fully released. Wholeness asks for all of it back. Wholeness is not a comfortable state to move toward when you have spent years building a life around being partial. It asks you to expand into territory that your current sense of self has not yet claimed. That expansion can feel, from the inside, like loss, because it requires releasing the smaller version of yourself that you have known how to be. But what feels like loss at the threshold almost always reveals itself on the other side as space. That is the real meaning underneath the number. Not that you are chosen, not that reward is coming, but that you are in the middle of becoming something larger than what you currently are. And the process has been underway long enough that it is waking you at 3 a.m. to make sure you know. The layer of transition. By the time 333 becomes consistent in someone's life, a transition is already in motion. Not approaching, not imminent. Already happening. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about what you are experiencing. You are not being warned about a future change. You are being shown a present one. The shift has already begun in the layers beneath your conscious awareness, in the emotional and psychological architecture of who you are becoming. It does not need your permission to proceed. It is already proceeding. Transitions of this kind rarely announce themselves clearly at their beginning. They feel, at first, like restlessness, like a vague sense that something no longer fits, without being able to name exactly what. Like standing in a room that used to feel like home and noticing, quietly, that it no longer does. The furniture is the same. The walls are the same. But something essential has shifted, and the room knows it even if you haven't said it aloud yet. This is not dissatisfaction in the ordinary sense. It is not ingratitude. It is the deeper self registering that it has grown beyond the container it currently inhabits, and that the container will need to change. Growth always precedes the structures that hold it. You become someone new before your life reflects it. The gap between those two realities is where 333 lives. What is transitioning in your life right now may be a relationship, a career, a belief system, a self-concept, a way of relating to others, or a way of relating to yourself. Often it is several of these simultaneously, because the deeper self does not make small adjustments. When it moves with coherence, reshaping multiple areas of life at once in service of a single underlying shift. And here is what matters. The fact that you are being woken at 3:33 during this transition is not incidental. It means the transition has momentum. It means it is real and it is moving, even on the nights when your outer life looks unchanged. Something is already different. You can feel it even if you cannot yet name it. And the fact that you cannot yet name it does not make it less true. The voice that wakes before the rest of you. There is a part of you that is never fully asleep. Not in the literal, physiological sense. During deep sleep, the body rests completely, and that rest is necessary and real. But there is a layer of awareness that does not shut down when consciousness narrows. It continues processing. It continues watching. It holds the thread of who you are even when the thinking mind has gone quiet. This is not mysticism. Psychologists have studied it under various names. The observing self, the witness consciousness, the background awareness that remains present even under anesthesia, even in states of extreme dissociation. It is the part of you that notices you are dreaming from within the dream. It is the part that sometimes knows, before any external event, that something important is about to change. It has access to a kind of knowing that the analytical mind, with all its speed and precision, simply cannot reach. This part of you is what wakes first at 3:33. It has already been awake. It has been processing what your conscious mind has not yet had the courage or the space to fully confront. And at the moment it reaches a threshold, when what it knows has grown too significant to remain unspoken, it pulls the rest of you awake with it. This is why waking at 3:33 so often carries that particular quality of sudden, unexplained alertness. Not groggy, not disoriented, awake, present, as if something inside you had been waiting for your eyes to open, because it has. The waking is not the beginning of the communication. It is the moment you finally become available to receive what has already been trying to reach you. That something has been waiting, patiently, for you to be still enough to hear it. The 3:33 is the moment it finally has your full attention. What you do with that attention, whether you roll over and dismiss it, or whether you sit with the silence and let it speak, determines whether the message gets through or has to try again tomorrow. Every time you dismiss it, it waits. Every time you listen, even briefly, something shifts. Why? It intensifies. Some people notice that the waking at 3:33 begins gradually. Once a week, then twice, then every few nights, then nightly. Others experience sudden intensification after a long period of quiet. Both patterns carry the same meaning, and that meaning is not threat. It is proximity. The intensification is not escalation in the sense of danger. It is escalation in the sense of urgency. The inner process that is driving the signal has reached a critical threshold, a point at which continuing to delay or avoid what is being asked of you carries a cost that the deeper self is no longer willing to pay silently. Something has shifted in the internal calculus. The waiting is over. Think of it as internal pressure building until it finds a release point. The release point is your waking. And when the waking becomes more frequent, more insistent, more difficult to dismiss, it is because the pressure has increased. Not because something threatening is arriving, but because something that has been waiting for your attention has waited long enough. It is not punishing you. It is insisting. There is something else worth naming here, because it matters more than most people realize. The intensification often happens at the precise moment when a person is closest to the threshold they need to cross, not when they are far from it, when they are right at the edge of it, when the change is so close it could almost happen on its own, and yet resistance is holding it back. This is the moment when the familiar feels most worth protecting, even when it has stopped serving you. When the stories that have kept you in place feel most convincing, when the cost of changing seems suddenly very concrete, and the cost of staying seems abstract. The waking intensifies at this moment because this is the moment when the deeper self is doing its most important work, not announcing a distant future, but insisting on a present truth that is right at the surface, waiting to be claimed. It intensifies because you are close, not because something is wrong. What to do when you wake at 3:33? Most people reach for their phone. They check the time, confirm the number, scroll for a few minutes, and eventually go back to sleep. And nothing changes. Not because the signal wasn't real, because it was never received. There is nothing wrong with that response as a human reflex. But it is not the response that 333 is asking for. Filling the silence immediately is the one thing that guarantees the message cannot land. What the waking is asking for is simple and difficult in equal measure. It is asking you to be still, not to perform a ritual, not to journal if journaling does not come naturally to you, not to recite affirmations or follow a spiritual protocol, simply to be still with the quality of awareness that was present when you woke up, to notice what you were feeling in the moment before full consciousness reasserted itself, to let the silence have a few minutes before you fill it with distraction. Most of what 333 is trying to communicate is not verbal. It does not arrive as a sentence, it arrives as a feeling, a quality of knowing, a directional sense, a subtle but unmistakable awareness of what is real in your life and what is no longer true, even if it once was. That awareness is present in the first 30 seconds after waking. It fades quickly once the analytical mind takes over. The practice, if you want to call it that, is not about decoding the number. It is about developing the capacity to stay present with what arises in the thin hour, before the filtering mind wakes fully and resumes its work of managing and explaining and deferring. It is about learning to tolerate the knowing before the knowing becomes comfortable enough to act on. If you wake at 3:33 tonight, try this. Do not reach for your phone immediately. Lie still for 3 minutes. Notice what is present in your body. Notice what thought or feeling surfaces first, before you have had time to shape it into something acceptable. Notice whether there is something you already know that you have been reluctant to fully acknowledge. It is almost always there. It is almost always the first thing that surfaces if you are willing to let it. You do not have to solve anything in those 3 minutes. You do not have to make any decisions. You only have to listen. That is all the waking has ever been asking you to do. And the more you listen, the clearer the message becomes until one night it no longer needs to wake you at all. What you are already becoming. You did not find this video by accident. That is not a dramatic claim. It is a simple observation about how attention works. People search for what they are already drawn toward. The fact that you were drawn toward this particular question, why you keep waking at 3:33, tells you something important about where you are in your life right now. It tells you that some part of you is already ready to hear the answer, not just curious about it, ready for it. You are at a threshold. You have likely been at this threshold for some time, perhaps without fully acknowledging it to yourself. Something in your life has completed its cycle or is completing it now, and something new is waiting on the other side of a door you have not yet fully opened. The waking has been the sound of that door, not slamming, not warning. Simply present night after night, reminding you that it is there. Not a warning, not a test, not a sign that you have been selected for something extraordinary while others have been passed over, but a persistent, patient, deeply personal signal from the most coherent part of who you are, calling you toward a version of yourself that is more honest, more integrated, more fully alive to what actually matters to you. That version has been waiting. It is not impatient, but it is ready. And somewhere beneath the noise of your daily life, you already know this. This is what 333 has always been trying to tell you. Not that something is coming, but that something is already here, already in motion, already reshaping the interior of your life, whether or not your conscious mind has caught up with it yet. The reshaping does not wait for your awareness. It only asks, eventually, for your participation. The question it has been asking every time it woke you at 3 in the morning is not a cosmic question. It is a simple and intimate one. Are you ready to stop waiting? The hour is always now. The threshold has always been here. And you, in all the ways that matter, have already begun to cross it. The waking was never the problem. It was the invitation. And tonight, if it comes again, you will finally know what it has been asking all along.